Paranormal M goes where others won't. The haunted, the cursed, the mysterious. It's all here. Subscribe and face the darkness with me. The Shadow Follows. A few years back, another family used to live in the house where I am now. They were deeply involved with some dark stuff. Witchcraft, illegal trades. And in that house lived a woman, her 2 daughters, and her cousin. He was mixed up with dangerous people, and one night it caught up to him. He went out late, just a couple of streets away, into a small abandoned lot. That night he never came back. They found him there, shot in the back. And after that, the threats came fast. The people who killed him warned the family to leave or face the same fate. Within months, they sold the house to my parents and disappeared from the neighborhood. My family moved in shortly after. My father, my mother, my younger brothers, and me, the oldest. We lived there for 2 years. During that time, something strange happened. Both my mother and I saw a man, about 180 centimeters tall, wearing white pants and a blue shirt, moving silently through the hallway. But here's the thing, neither of us said a word about it to the other one, not for 2 years. Then everything got worse. My parents separated, and my father's new partner was a woman who openly practiced black magic. She was involved in Macumba rituals. Macumba. And even tried to hurt us. I'll never forget the night somebody buried graveyard soil at our door. It was meant for my mom. It almost worked. But she found help from others who practiced protective magic, and she survived. A year after the separation, we moved away temporarily to live by the coast with my aunt. But when we came back, we learned my father had moved in with his new girlfriend, and she used her things and slept in our rooms and, as some neighbors later said, was seen doing witchcraft inside her house. When we returned, she was gone, but something else stayed. And it's been 9 years now. The figure we used to see changed. What once looked like a man turned into a thick, dark shadow showing up almost every night. Objects started to move on their own. Cups fell without a hand touching them. The computer chair would spin at night. My webcam light flicked on by itself whenever I came back from the bathroom. And somehow I saw it more often than anyone else. Once, at dawn, I opened my bedroom door and I saw the shadow inside my mother's room. When it noticed me, it rushed toward me, and I remember crying in the dark too many nights to even count. At 16, I moved rooms. There's 3 bedrooms in this house. My mother's room, the middle room, in bad shape, and the back room, which is mine. That back room used to belong to a man who died. And according to the neighbors, he used to do rituals there. The first night I slept in that room, I woke up to everything being turned upside down. And there it was again. The shadow. It did not want me there. Every winter, the walls were sweating moisture. Faces and handprints appeared out of nowhere. And it's been 3 years now, and I guess we've learned to live together. I've yelled at it more than once, telling it to leave me alone. It still shows up, but now I don't even flinch. Living with this thing has changed me. I've grown colder and harder, and fear isn't the same anymore. The last time I saw it, I turned around in the patio, and there it was, just standing there staring at me. I laughed and said, "It's been a while." Even my family says I'm not the same person I used to be. They say I've changed, that something about me feels different. Maybe they're right. Living with a shadow for years does something to you. There are other stories that I haven't told yet, like the night my cat stared at the same corner for hours, or how my little brother got sick after the shadow stuck to him. But that's for another time. Even now, as I write this from the back room, I can feel that familiar chill. He's still here. Trapped in the loop. You're not kidding. I was stuck in a dream loop for what felt like forever. I've decided to come here, to r/paranormal, to share this because honestly, it left me shaken. I've had nightmares before, but nothing like this. It made me afraid to sleep for days. And that night, didn't even make it to my room upstairs, too tired from work. Crashed on the living room couch. Normally, I don't like sleeping downstairs, and it always feels heavier at night. I had no energy to even care. My mom was at her night shift. It was just me, my 2 dogs, and the cat. Usually their presence calms me, but that night it just didn't. The weird part started when I woke up. Everything around me looked exactly like before I fell asleep. The dim lamp, the TV screen reflecting the empty room. My pets curled up on the rug. But when I tried to sit up, I couldn't. I was completely paralyzed. My chest tightened. No sound came out when I tried to scream. I must have passed out again just from the panic. And then I woke up a second time. Same room, same lighting, same everything. This time my fingers twitched a little and I tried to pull myself up by the couch arm. But again, no strength, like something was pressing me down. My throat burned from the effort of screaming silently. Tears welled up. No one could hear me. Not even the dogs moved. This cycle repeated over and over, and sometimes I could move my arms and sometimes not at all. House is always the same. And then something changed. I noticed a figure standing at the end of the couch. Just a shape, no face, no details. A shadow, but with weight. The moment I saw it, I blacked out again. When I opened my eyes, it was gone. I could finally move my arms and legs, but my voice was still missing. I banged my fists on the window above the couch. I was hoping the noise would, wake me up for real, or at least get the dog's attention. They didn't even twitch. That's when I knew I was trapped in a loop. I tried everything, shaking myself, biting my own tongue. I was clawing at the couch cushions. This time I couldn't pass out again or wake up. I was stuck in a silent, airless world, screaming with no sound. Felt like dying. Like I was disappearing inside my own house. I don't know how long it lasted, and when I finally snapped awake, my hands were clenched so tight my nails had dug into my palms, drawing blood. And for a moment, I still didn't believe I was out. I screamed anyway, this time for real. The dogs jumped up barking. I grabbed my phone, called my mom, sobbing and begging her to tell me if I was awake. I'd fallen asleep around maybe 2 a.m. now, and officially woke up at 4. 2 hours. And for 2 days after that, I refused to sleep. Even now, I set alarms throughout the night because I'm terrified it'll happen again. It scarred me. The shadow in the basement. This happened on Monday, March 2nd, 2020. Honestly, I don't think it'll leave my mind anytime soon. A little background first. I work at a small family-style deli. It used to belong to my aunt. And a few months back, it was bought by new owners, and I stayed on as the night cleaner. Now, weird stuff at this place isn't exactly new. When I was little, I used to sit in the storage room downstairs while my aunt worked up front. And even then, there was this heavy, chilly feeling down there. And sometimes, just at the edge of my vision, I'd catch a glimpse of this tall, fog-like figure, I guess I would call it. March 2nd felt different, though. It wasn't just one odd thing happening, it was several, all in one day. Work started off normal enough. I was helping behind the counter and learning to prep orders, even though I usually scrub floors and wash trays. And there were 4 of us on that shift. I was near the register and the kitchen was behind me. Past that, the dish area. One coworker was coming out of the kitchen while we all heard a sharp noise from inside. So we turned up just in time to see a stack of soup containers slide off the top shelf and hit the floor. Now, usually I'd just say something shifted like gravity or a breeze or whatever. But that shelf has a metal guard at the front, and those containers nest tightly together. If one falls, the whole stack falls. But only 3 slid off, and the rest stayed put like nothing happened. We laughed it off and said, "Yep, it's the ghost again." Same way we do when doors creak or spoons clatter for no reason. Later that night, after the dinner rush, just me and one coworker were left to close up. I stepped out of the dish area toward the dining room. The second I crossed the doorway, I heard 2 loud claps behind me and I froze. My coworker and I just stared at each other. There was no one else in the kitchen, and I checked anyway, and it was empty. So we ended up chatting about ghosts, half joking, half serious. We've all heard stories about this place. Before leaving, I went down to the basement to grab trash bags, and I muttered out loud, "All right, ghost, do your thing," in this fake brave tone. And that's when I saw it. Down the narrow walkway between the soda crates and the freezer, a shadow, tall and thick like smoke, rushed toward me. I actually flinched. Then it was gone. Don't remember much except grabbing the bags and sprinting back upstairs, and my coworker said my face was as white as a sheet like I'd seen a car crash. We locked up faster than ever. I told him and a couple other coworkers later, and they said they believed me, or at least they believed something's been hanging around here for years. Anyway, gotta clock in for another shift soon. If I disappear, well, blame the ghost. Yeah, me too. A Sunday Goodbye. My grandfather was one of the most extraordinary people in my life. My dad was his only child, and my siblings and I were her only grandchildren, or his. 3 girls, and he treated us like absolute treasures. I was lucky enough to grow up with my papa by my side for a long time. He was the only grandfather I ever had, and my mom's dad passed away before I was born, and her mom never remarried. So Papa filled every corner of that role with love and laughter. He passed away in 2017, after a long and wearying illness. And in those final months, his legs grew weak and his mind tired from the frustration of being stuck in a body that he really no longer would let him live the way he wanted to. He'd been a pastor all of his life. Nothing made him happier than preaching and talking to people. When he couldn't even make it to church anymore, I could see it weighed on him deeply. The last time I talked to him was a week before he died. My close friend's wedding was coming up, and I was part of the bridal party. I asked him quietly if he wanted me to skip it, though both of us probably knew it could be the last time I'd see him. He squeezed my hand and said, "No, sweetheart, you go on, celebrate." I told him I loved him, and he told me he loved me too, and I walked out of his house, not realizing that would be the last time I'd hear his voice. He left us early on a Sunday morning, the very day I was supposed to return. Somehow it felt right. Sunday mornings were his favorite. And after decades of preaching, it made sense that his first day in heaven would be on Sunday. We were heartbroken, but also at peace knowing he left on his favorite day. I was the only grandchild who couldn't really make it to see him in hospice, but I held on to our last goodbye. A few quiet but meaningful things happened after, and I'm a teacher, and the week he passed was the start of pre-planning at the school where I worked. I walked into a colleague's classroom one morning and I saw a huge box of Little Debbie oatmeal cream pies on her desk. She told me to grab some. I immediately burst into tears. She didn't know, but, well, Papa always would just keep a little box of those in his pantry. He'd give me one every single time I visited, and she just smiled and said, "Take another." Later, when I received a small box of his belongings, I found his Korean War dog tags tucked inside. I hung them above my bed so I'd feel close at night. Not long after, I dreamt of him. Everything was white, soft and quiet, almost like that scene between Harry and Dumbledore in Deathly Hallows. And then there he was. He looked decades younger, hair dark and thick again, no glasses, wearing a white shirt and black slacks. He had that big crooked grin I loved so much. He reached for my hand, and I swear I could feel the warmth and the roughness of his palm, exactly how it felt when I was a little girl. Papa smiled at me and said, "I love you, baby. I'm all right." Then he was gone. My grandfather was a remarkable man, and though I haven't felt his presence like it since, I don't really need to. I know he's at peace. And that dream is one of the most treasured memories, a quiet Sunday goodbye that felt like a promise. Whispers beyond the door. Most of the unsettling experiences I've ever had with anything remotely supernatural happened when I was with my ex. And I've got a handful of stories, so buckle up. Click. From ages 21 to 24, I dated her, and she wasn't just cool. She was this effortlessly bold, alternative girl with streaks of red and silver in her hair, an obsession with all things creepy. And her family house, honestly, it felt like stepping into another realm. In their living room hung this ancient portrait of her great-grandparents. Everyone in her family swore that if they tried to move that photo or mess with the house, weird stuff would happen. They weren't lying, by the way. I'd seen doors rattle on windless days, glasses tip over by themselves, and whispers float through the hall when no one was around. They had these translucent French doors separating the dining room and kitchen. If you stood in the dining room, you could clearly make out shadows moving, and you could hear murmurs, as if people were chatting inside. But when you went around and stepped into the kitchen, nothing, just a quiet hum of the old refrigerator. Then there was the dog, the ghost dog. If you sat on their sunken couch long enough, you'd see a blur rush down the stairs, take a sharp turn, vanish into the kitchen. You'd even hear faint tapping of claws on the tile before silence swallowed it whole. So, one night I'd left my hoodie upstairs. As I ran up to grab it, I saw through the frosted glass of the stairwell door a husky sitting perfectly still at the landing. My heart just froze. I pushed the door open, but by the time it swung past where it was sitting, it had disappeared into thin air. I snatched the hoodie, bolted down, pulse hammering. When I told my ex, she was casually rinsing dishes, and I muttered, "I just saw a dog upstairs." Without even looking up, she asked, "White and gray husky?" I swear, my blood turned cold. A couple of months later, we went camping at an old war memorial site in upstate New York with one of her friends. We'd rented this tiny wooden cabin built sometime in the 1930s. We were sitting around a fire pit rolling a blunt and laughing about nothing. Then came the crunching. Steady footsteps on the gravel path behind us. They circled the cabin slowly, like someone pacing and finally stopping at the edge of the firelight. I slid the tray under my chair and turned. There was someone or something standing at that tree line. I could see the shimmer of the fire flicker off what should have been a face, but when I hit it with the flashlight, the beam sliced clean through empty air. No figure, just trees. We sprinted inside and barricaded the door with a small table. And that entire night, there were random knocks on the cabin walls. None of us stepped back out. The warning in the attic. When I was 11, my mom decided to clean out the attic before the end of the year. She wanted to donate old clothes and shoes to Goodwill to get some extra tax deductions. Is that how that works? She called me up to ask if I wanted to keep anything before she packed it all up, and while digging through dusty boxes, I found an old Parker Brothers Ouija board tucked inside a cracked shoebox. I had seen something like this in movies, never actually used one. I asked if she'd play with me. She laughed and said that she would, and once she finished sorting through the donations. That evening after dinner, she explained how the board worked, and slowly, like it was some kind of old family tradition, we lit a small candle, turned off all the lights, and started the session. Honestly, I was half expecting it to be a total joke. The first thing the board spelled out was my mom's name. I burst out laughing and accused her of moving the planchette. Well, she swore that she wasn't, so she asked the board, "Who are we talking to?" And it spelled out the name of her ex-boyfriend. Let's call him Eddie. Passed away in a car crash when I was 5. I only had a blurry, vague memory of him. She asked if Eddie could prove it was him. The planchette moved quickly, spelling out little details only Eddie could have known. Where he'd first kissed her, what song played on their first date. Still, I assumed she was the one moving it. Then things got weird. Eddie said he had a warning about my stepdad, Tom. He spelled out, "Tom is dangerous. He will hurt her. He will be punished." Over and over again it said this. Mom frowned and told the board that Eddie would never say things like that. That she had a good life now. She pushed the planchette to goodbye and blew out the candle. We didn't talk much about it after that night. Oh boy. 3 months later, everything changed. One morning, while getting ready for school, I noticed something odd hidden behind the air vent near my closet. It was a tiny camera. At first, I thought maybe it was some kind of security gadget. But after my mom called the police, the truth came out. Tom had installed cameras in several rooms, including my bedroom and bathroom. Ugh. He'd been recording me changing and sleeping for months, and worse is he's been trading the videos online. Jesus. Excuse me. It's disgusting. Tom was arrested and charged and eventually sentenced to prison. Good. No one, absolutely no one had suspected anything. He'd been the kind, funny man who made everyone feel safe. And a few weeks after everything fell apart, walked into my mom's room. She's sitting on the edge of the bed holding that same Ouija board box, and her eyes were distant when she whispered, "Eddie tried to warn us." Still get chills remembering that night in the attic. I don't know how or why, but somehow, Eddie knew. That story is scary. I like that one. The house that didn't want us there. In late summer, when the air was still warm but the evenings started to cool down, my brother and his girlfriend were going around looking for houses. My mom and I usually tagged along, partly to help, mostly because it was kind of fun. One evening, I stumbled across a listing on Zillow for a place not too far from the neighborhood they liked. It was having an open house that same day, so we all decided to swing on by. The first thing Mom and I noticed when we pulled up was how oddly dim the house looked. The sun was shining everywhere else. Front yards of the neighbors glowed gold in the late light. But this one house, it sat in a kind of dull shadow like it didn't want to be seen. The oak tree out front wasn't even big enough to block the sun like that. It just looked wrong. And then the roof was covered in dozens of pigeons. Silent, still, almost like they were glued there. No fluttering away as we approached, just watching. I don't know why, but that gave me chills. As soon as we reached the front steps, a rancid metallic smell hit me and Mom. Nobody else seemed to notice. We even checked our shoes, thinking maybe we'd stepped in something. The porch was clean. Inside was worse. It was cold and not just chilly from the air conditioning. It was cold in a way that felt like it came from the walls. A couple of lights were on, but half the house was in shadows, even though it was barely 4:30. There was a narrow side hallway tucked behind the living room, and the light bulb above it buzzed and flickered like it was about to go out. The moment we stepped in, the air got thick. The smell became so strong, Mom literally gagged. She stepped outside immediately, said she felt something sitting on her chest. I stayed with my brother's girlfriend, and she peeked into the first bedroom and froze. The windows were completely fogged over from the inside, like somebody just boiled a kettle in there. No fans, no heater, no reason. And yet the curtains were swaying like a breeze was passing through. She grabbed my arm and said, "We should leave." Just as we turned, we heard a loud clank from the garage door. My brother and the realtor had gone that way. Apparently, the lights had cut out, and the door jammed shut. When they got out, my brother looked pale as hell. He said the windows had been nailed shut, and there were strange symbols scratched into the back wall. There's also an old freezer locked with chains, and he didn't open it. As we were about to leave, we heard faint, staticky music coming from the kitchen, like an old radio tuning itself. No one had turned anything on, and the dial wouldn't budge. It flickered on and off as we walked out the front door. Right before we got in the car, I looked back and saw the curtains in the upstairs window moving again, although every single window was shut tight. 2 days later, the listing vanished from Zillow, no explanation. Later, I found an article mentioning that the area used to have some pretty dark history back in the 50s. Whether that explains anything, I don't know, but that house, it doesn't want us there. When the wind carried her back. This happened quite a few years ago, maybe closer to 12 now. My family, being my mom, my 2 sisters, and my brother, we only had 1 dog and a single cat at the time. But one chilly spring afternoon, a scruffy gray cat began showing up on our porch. She was thin, her fur a little bit rough. But she had the most determined eyes I've ever seen on an animal. She would sit there for hours staring at the door like she was waiting for someone to finally remember her. My stepdad wasn't thrilled about taking in another animal, so at first we ignored her. And every evening for almost 2 weeks she'd just sit there, softly meowing, leaving little gifts of birds or insects on the doormat. One day, when my younger sister went out to get the mail, the cat darted right past her and disappeared under the couch. No one had the heart to chase her out. So we named her Willow, because she moved like the wind, quiet but always where you least expected her. Willow was a hunter in the truest sense. She didn't touch the dry food in the kitchen, but preferred to roam the garden and return smelling of rain-soaked soil and the herbs that grew by the fence. A few weeks later, a family friend brought us a tiny golden-furred kitten. And to our surprise, Willow immediately took to her, grooming her and curling up beside her at night. When she wasn't prowling outside, Willow loved my mom's study. She'd stretch out on the windowsill, soaking in the sunlight like she always had belonged there, you know. For just 4 short months, she filled her home with this strange, wild kind of warmth. She was never meant to live in a tame life, that indoor kind. So one misty morning, as my mom opened the door to let her out, Willow bounded across the street. Car didn't stop in time. My mom found her first, and she wrapped Willow gently in one of my brother's old baby blankets, placed her in a wooden box. We buried her under the plum tree in her backyard, where the wind always seemed to sing a little bit louder. And it was quiet in the house that day, the kind of quiet that seems to press against your chest. Hours later, as the light started to fade, my mom came out of her study with a stunned look on her face. "Come here," she whispered. All of us followed. The moment we stepped into the room, the air shifted. That earthy, rain-washed smell that was so uniquely Willow's filled every corner. It was the strongest by the window where she used to nap. Mom hadn't told us why she called us in, but she needed to, and we all smelt it and we all felt her. Mom said she'd been sitting at her desk when the scent crept in, so it was so strong she thought for a second Willow had somehow walked back in. None of us said much. We just sat there together, letting the smell of her settle over us, whispering how much we missed her, and then just as suddenly it was gone, like the wind that she was named for. When the night watches back. I've had strange experiences for as long as I can remember, probably since I was around 3. My very first memory were of these soft glowing spheres, kind of like liquid blue marbles floating in midair. They'd drift into my room every few nights, slowly gliding above my bed like they had their own quiet rhythm to them. They looked like drops of water moving in space. I used to watch them until I fell asleep. When I was 10, something new began. I started seeing a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, wearing a pale dress with tiny yellow flowers stitched all over it. She didn't speak, just crouched under my mom's craft table, staring like she was hiding for something. She never came closer. At 11, the nightmares began. I'd jolt awake to see shadowy figures crawling across my walls and floor. And when I fully snapped out of it, there would always be this tall, thin shape standing at the doorway. He wore a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat, and his outline sharper than anything else in the dark. Then I started seeing him even when I was awake. When I told Mom, she said she'd seen the same figure before, so my sisters had too. That's when I began looking into spirituality and started practicing pagan rituals. A few years later, after too many bad nights, my boyfriend, who's now my husband, congratulations, suggested that we do a cleansing ritual in my room, and it should have been simple. Candles, sage, and protection chants. Nothing would light. It was like the air itself was pushing back, and my altar items shifted when we turned away, and a weight pressed on the room like a held breath. We stopped that night. A few days later, we tried again, starting outside and working our way in. Halfway through, the floor under the house exploded with this massive crashing noise. Then the pipes started rattling like rocks being thrown through them. I was shaking, but we didn't quit. The second we finished, everything went dead silent. That's when we heard the growl, deep and low and almost animal-like, and this black cloud-like shape slid past the doorway. By 18, we were living in a quiet little town called Ballingup. Ballingup? It's right next to a patch of forest. There were no fences, just open gravel and trees. Some nights we'd see streaks of red and orange light weaving between the trunks. It wasn't scary that time, and honestly, it was kind of beautiful. The last encounter at her house was different. Liam and Mum had taken the truckload to a new place. I stayed to clean. It was just past 8 p.m. and the house was creaking, and normal enough, I thought. Then movement outside caught my eye. Across the road, half hidden behind bamboo, he was there, in a tall coat and a hat, watching. I screamed so loud the window shook, and then they really did. Every door slammed shut. I ran into the pantry, locked it, and waited. When Liam and Mom came back, I was a mess, sobbing and shaking. We didn't come back till daylight. The move went mostly fine after that, until the very last trip. And as I stepped through the front door for the final time, it slammed shut on my hand so hard it fractured 3 bones. Ouch. The Night in the Mountain Cave. Thought I'd start small, with one about my dad who passed away. I was at home in 2014, just shy of his 93rd birthday. He was a career soldier full of stories, but none quite like this one. So my dad, Don Baker, he had a presence you couldn't ignore, a broad-shouldered man with a deep rolling laugh that filled every room. A temper that, when it came, it could silence pretty much just as fast. He married my mother when I was 6, and I grew up learning to read those 2 sides of him like weather. And for years I thought those were the only sides he had. Until when maybe he was in my early 20s. He shared a story that revealed a quiet, unsettled part of him I'd never seen before. Restless and itching to leave his little Minnesota home, or hometown, I suppose, and his quote-unquote Norski clan, he shaved a year off of his age to join the army in 1938. And before long, he found himself swept up in intelligence work and was shipped to China. That was just after the Japanese invasion of Shanghai. It's when Pearl Harbor happened. He jumped to the South Pacific as a paratrooper, fought until he was badly injured. That's cool. After months in a stateside hospital, he was deemed too banged up for combat, but good enough to train others. So they assigned him to the newly formed 11th Airborne at Camp McCall. It was there, amid jump towers and dusty fields, that he helped build out new strategies for paratrooper recon missions. Years later, during the Korean War, now an intelligence operative, he was part of a small team that jumped behind enemy lines to collect and return with critical information. The danger wasn't just in the landing. Oh no. The front shifted constantly, making every return route a gamble. Many didn't make it back. One night after a recon, he was halfway through the route back to friendly lines when a violent mountain storm rolled in. The wind howled like a living thing. The rain felt like needles on his face. He knew the trail too well to push through it blind. So he turned back a short distance, went to a small cave that he'd passed earlier. The place was cramped but dry, and exhaustion just took him fast. He fell asleep to the sound of the storm hammering all the rocks outside. Then he woke up. He woke up to someone shaking his shoulder. It was Buddy, a friend he'd trained and fought beside for years. Someone he'd trusted with his life. Buddy looked soaked and pale in the weak beam of a flashlight. His voice was hoarse from the wind, and he crouched down, drew a crude map into the dirt, showing a detour through a ravine that my dad hadn't even known existed. The pass up north's been blown, Buddy told him. You take this route, you'll make it. Then Buddy clapped him on the shoulder with that half grin I'd always remembered, slipped out into the storm again. Dad said the whole thing couldn't have lasted more than a few minutes. Following that new route, Dad made it back without so much as a glimpse of trouble, and 2 days later, after dropping off his intel, he stumbled into the mess tent, dirty and dead tired. He came to a round of cheers from his unit. Over watery coffee between laughter and clattering trays, he asked. Pretty casually, he asked this. So, when'd Buddy get in? Table fell silent. Bake, someone said finally. Buddy didn't make it. Dad frowned. What the hell are you talking about? He was with me in the cave 2 nights ago. Another voice cut in quieter now. Buddy was killed 4 days ago, near the North Pass. They took everything. For a second, he thought they were playing some cruel joke on him, but the looks on their faces said otherwise. That can't be, he muttered. He showed me the ravine route, and I followed it home. The man across the table leaned forward. His face was pale as chalk. Big. There is no ravine route on our maps. Dad never tried to explain what happened after that. He just stared at me with this look halfway between defiance and wonder. He was there, he said, tapping his finger on the table. Buddy was there with me. If he hadn't have been, I wouldn't have come home. He didn't call it a ghost story. He called it a miracle. Maybe not even. He just let it sit there like a fact, unshakable as the mountains themselves. I like that one. The missing hours under the streetlight. I'll change names of any people involved, but the places and the road names, they'll be factual. I've never told anyone else about this story except her. Mostly because even though I do believe in certain paranormal things like ghosts and UFOs and strange creatures and the like, I'm not the kind of person who buys into every story or wants people to think I've lost it. It was late spring of 2012, and I remember it clearly because my 23rd birthday had just gone by. On a Thursday night. I just finished a late shift at a local diner. It's in a nearby small town, barely 8 miles away from the place where I lived. I decided to stop at a quiet bar down the street, where my cousin Luke worked behind the counter. It wasn't a busy night. Outside of the occasional karaoke night, the place was usually pretty empty. I was only halfway through my first rum and coke when my phone started buzzing. It was Ben, a childhood friend I've known since elementary school. Told me he and a few friends were hanging out at his brother's place. Beer and cards and maybe some weed. Asked if I wanted in. I figured why not. Hadn't even finished my drink, so I told him I'd drive over. House was in Toledo, about a 25-minute drive from my place. I swung by my house to grab a bit of cash, and I had this habit of only bringing $20 to the bar to make sure I didn't drink too much or do something dumb like closing the place down. Checked the clock in the kitchen before leaving. 10:37 p.m. Shot Ben a quick call to say I was on my way. They planned to kick off the poker game at 11 sharp. I'd taken the same route to his brother Eric's place dozens of times before. We'd gather there at least a couple of times a month, a small group of us to play tournament-style poker in the basement until somebody took it all. I was idling at a red light at the corner of Oakdale Street and East Broadway, just across from the elementary school on that corner. And that's when I saw it. At first, it looked like nothing more than a weird reflection from the traffic light, but then I realized it was not. There, in fact, was a white light hanging in the sky just behind the signal, pointing straight downward. It wasn't flickering like a star or a plane light would. It was steady and sharp and unnaturally bright at the core of it, like a spotlight without a source. I turned off the radio and rolled down the window. Silence. No helicopter could be that close without making a sound. Curious, I pulled into the little parking lot of an old ice cream shop. It was across the street. I wanted to give myself a better look at this thing. When I stepped out, tilted my head up, I saw the shape clearly. It wasn't round like flying saucers people always describe. It was elongated and oval, almost like a silver capsule and smooth with no markings or blinking lights. It hovered there perfectly still. For a second, I thought maybe it was a blimp. Way too big. Too bright, too. After what felt like maybe half a minute, my eyes began to sting. Not like burning fire, but that watery, irritated feeling when a bug hits you in the eye. I squinted, I rubbed them for a few seconds. When I opened them again, the light was gone. It was just gone. No sound, no trace. Only the empty night sky over the neighborhood rooftops. So I just shrugged it off. Figured I'd tell the guys at the game about the weird light later. Eric's house was maybe 4 blocks away now. I parked, knocked on the basement door like I always did, and there's nothing. Tried the front door. Nothing again. Finally, after pounding loud enough to wake the block, Eric answered, looking confused and half awake. "Why the hell are you banging on my door this late, man?" Kind of laughed nervously. "Ben told me to come over. You guys are playing cards, remember?" He squinted at me. "Yeah, but he called you like, what, 5 hours ago? It's 4:30 in the morning." I froze. My brain refused to process it. In my head, it was maybe 11:10, 11:15 tops. There's no way 4 hours had passed between that red light and his front door. I forced a laugh, tried to brush it off. Damn, must have really lost track of time. Can I use your bathroom before I head back? He nodded, still eyeing me like something was off. And in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize myself. My eyes were bloodshot red, and there was like a bruised darkness beneath both of them, like I hadn't slept in days. So, to this day, can't explain what happened during those missing hours. I don't know if the light had anything to do with it. I can only say this. I've stood on that corner since then, many times, staring up at that sky, wondering if that night was just a strange trick of time or something else entirely. Whispers in the dark. I'll try my best to keep this short, but honest. Good man. I have what I can only describe as a kind of unseen protector I have met others who've had strange experiences as well, but few ever seem to live with it as constantly as I have. When I was 14, everything in my life felt like it was unraveling. My family was a storm of arguments. I spent most of my time locked away in my room, just quietly falling apart. It was during that dark stretch that I started sensing something in the house. It wasn't imagination, at least it didn't feel like it. And at night I'd hear soft dragging noises along the walls, like nails against wood sorts of sounds. I'd wake up and I'd feel cold fingertips brushing against my arm, and sometimes I'd see a tall shadow linger just beyond the corner of my bed. But then there was something else. A different presence. Spoke to me softly in the quiet, whispered my name when I was shaking. Pulled me out of nightmares even. Kept me breathing when I thought I couldn't anymore. One night I fell asleep sobbing, woke with my hand lifted in the air like someone was holding it gently. I squeezed and something squeezed back. When I opened my eyes, it released me and the darkness fell still again. Another time I heard a clear voice. "Sweetheart, wake up." My eyes shot open to the weight of a shadow pressing down on my chest. I shoved with all the strength I had, gasping. That same whispering presence sat beside me on the bed, and the heavy one dissolved into the corner of the room. Eventually, the darker presence seemed to fade, driven out, or perhaps simply gone. The whisperer stayed, and it grew closer. I started calling him Leo. He made sure no other spirits came near, and he liked to talk to me. Through a pendulum board and through my dreams, through a voice in my head that didn't sound like mine. Sometimes he'd say the strangest things that turned out to kind of matter later. 2 nights ago, he told me to grab a few coins. I don't carry cash. I asked why, and he just repeated, "Take them." That morning, I left my wallet at home. Without those coins, I wouldn't have been able to eat it all that day. Other times, he's told me to change my route or buy something random. Later, it winds up saving me from a mess. It's kind of unnerving, but it's real. After high school, when I moved into shared apartments, things got stranger. Leo wasn't just protecting me. He reacted to people. I once told him I didn't want someone touching me again, and that person threw out their back sitting down next to me. Another broke out in hives every single time they reached toward me. The moment they left my space, the marks would fade like they'd never been there. A coworker tried to make fun of the whole thing, dared Leo to show up. A week later, he begged me to tell Leo to stop. He'd been pushed off of his bed, heard whispers in the night, and saw something walk down his hallway. That same silhouette, always the same. And then there were the objects. Keys on the floor one moment, gone the next. Reappearing days later, sitting upright on a shelf. A hat dropped from the ceiling once. That's totally normal, huh? TV remote found balanced perfectly on the bathroom door frame. Nobody could explain it. Friends, partners, even random guests began to experience him. He'd whisper their names when they were alone, and he once warned my best friend somebody would steal from her. And they did that same day. One roommate told me every night at exactly 2 a.m. he'd hear Leo walking down the hall, heavy and deliberate footsteps. The door to his room would creak open just a few inches and then close softly. And over time, he started saying, "Good night, Leo," like it was normal. People who had seen him all described the same figure. Tall, like impossibly tall, hunched but not towering, long, thin limbs, a face with sharp angles and glowing red eyes, covered in a shadowy fur like something between a wolf and a nightmare. Never a sound from the mouth, only whispers that arrive inside your skull. This has been going on for years. At least a dozen people, some who've never met each other, have described him nearly all the same way. Different homes, different cities, same Leo. Keep wondering, are there others with guardians like this, something that protects and watches but isn't entirely gentle? I'm open to questions and thoughts and stories, and I'm open to anything. Echoes of the Attic. Growing up, strange things were simply woven into the fabric of my everyday life. Spent my childhood in a creaky house built back in 1872, and for as long as I can remember, my siblings and I, we shared that house with at least 3 restless spirits. The first one as a child, or at least I think so. I never saw a face, but the energy was playful and patient, I guess you could say. This spirit's favorite pastime was to race up a narrow wooden staircase that led from the kitchen to the upper hallway, and then leap down again, making the board squeal. And this happened at all hours, mind you, but especially late at night when everyone was trying to sleep. We'd hear the hurried steps, then the thud of the small jump, over and over until somebody dared to open their door. Then, of course, complete silence. The same spirit loved to play with the bathroom door, and it would push it open and slam it shut just when somebody was inside. And the light switch, click, 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 on and off like a taunt. My most terrifying encounter with it happened one gray afternoon when I was about 17. I was soaking in the tub when the overhead bulb began to flicker softly, rhythmically. Tried to ignore it until the door, which I had left slightly open, it slammed shut with a force that made the mirror rattle. My heart felt like it was trying to escape my actual chest, so I just froze there and I was listening. Then came the sound of feet on the stairs, light and quick. I waited for what felt like forever and pushed the door open. Nothing, just still air and the quiet groan of old wood, and I checked every room. House was locked and empty. The second spirit is a woman. We've all seen her at least once. My moment came when I was about 13, sprawled on my bed reading a book when movement caught my eye. Through the open door, I saw her glide past, tall and long-faded dress that brushed the floor like smoke. Her hair was pinned up in a neat knot. Her face had no motion at all. She didn't even make a sound. Just walked down the hallway and disappeared beyond the stairwell. I wasn't frightened then, only curious. Years later, when my sister moved back in with her newborn, the woman made herself known again. And on several nights, I'd wake up to the baby crying, and then you'd hear this lullaby. It was soft and low, the kind of tune you hum to calm a child. The crying would stop. It would be replaced by silence. But whenever I opened the nursery door, the song vanished and the room was empty except for my sleeping niece, of course. Happened 4 times, then never again. And finally, there's the cat. A small, pale shadow darting just at the corner of your vision. It would streak up the staircase, brush against your ankles, and disappear into thin air before you could even react. And more than once I tripped over where it should have been, if you know what I mean. Cat never made a sound, but its presence was as real as the house itself. Careful now. Whispers Among the Trees. March 13th. I went with my mom and went to a close friend in a quiet rural area in Minnesota. This place is infamous statewide, not just for eerie sightings, but for its long history of strange gatherings and hidden rituals and unsettling rumors that have floated around for decades now. out of respect for the locals who dislike outsiders. Ghost hunting, who don't like outsiders ghost hunting. I won't name the location, but we were allowed there because of family connections and because my mom runs a small YouTube channel about unusual places. The night before, I barely slept, and maybe that played a part in what happened next. We arrived late in the afternoon, heading straight toward the old burial site that sits at the end of a gravel road. So my mom mentioned how the place was known for its quote-unquote intense energy. She's always been sensitive to things most people can't feel, almost like a radar for emotions in the air. As the car crept forward, the woods on either side leaned in like silent witnesses of sorts, their branches bare and creaking in the cold. Off to the right was a single small mound covered in pale green moss, even though the ground was still hard with frost. And that was the first thing we noticed. There were no other mounds or anything nearby, just this one oddly alive. We got out of the car, our boots crunching on the gravel, began walking down the narrow road. It didn't take long before we all heard it. A rustling sound from the trees. At first, we assumed it was deer. Later, we'd find tracks that confirmed some animals had been passing through recently, which did calm us a little. But as we kept walking, the air grew heavier and the trees groaned and popped as though pushed by an invisible weight. There was no wind. When we reached the old iron gate, it stood wide open as if expecting us. The moment I stepped through, a pressure settled over me like a wet blanket. It wasn't just nerves. Something felt wrong. I walked slowly between the crooked rows of gravestones, some so faded they barely had names left. The graveyard sat on a gentle slope, and the silence was unnatural and supernormal even. And the birds in the distance sounded far away, like they're warning us not to go deeper. A pull kept drawing me toward the edge of the woods, and every few steps I caught the flick of something dark in the corner of my eye. Behind a tree, then slipping behind an old gravestone. But when I looked directly, nothing, no deer, no squirrels, no movement at all. Near the far corner, I found one small lonely grave, completely separated from the others. Mom noticed it too and muttered, "Why is that one all alone?" As if on cue, I heard a sudden crunching of leaves. I looked up just in time to catch the shadow of something retreating between the trees. Told myself it was just an animal, but the graveyard was utterly still. I didn't believe my own excuse. Then the dizziness hit. My steps slowed and the world tilted just slightly. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt watchful. I could hear one bird chirping somewhere close, repeating the same hollow note again and again. I need to take a sip of a drink, excuse me. Again and again. And at the time, I didn't think much of it. Well, drink didn't work at all. Now I wonder if it was a warning. We turned back toward the gate, and that's when my stomach twisted sharply, as if somebody had grabbed it from the inside. My hands were cold, but my skin burned. The creaking trees sounded like whispers urging us to leave. Clutched my side and quickened my pace toward the car, afraid I'd collapse right there on the path. Once inside the vehicle, my head was spinning. Mom set up the spirit box with the aux cord. While the static crackled, I pressed my forehead against the freezing window, trying to cool down. I didn't want to throw up in her friend's car, so when the session ended, I told her how sick I felt. She turned to me, eyes wide, and said, "Something tried to latch onto you," she said. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but I could tell she was worried. She handed me her rosary, a pouch of dried herbs and a few charged stones, telling me to keep them pressed to my hands. I focused on breathing and whispering quiet words in my head. The pressure slowly lifted, but didn't disappear completely until we were home. Mom saged me by the front door, and the moment the smoke hit my skin, the weight in my chest broke. I slept through the night without dreams. Aren't you one to brag? Sorry about not editing out my drinking and coughing. It's just that I've lost a bunch of jobs to robots actually stealing my voice lately, so I like leaving in all of the stuff that makes it abundantly clear I'm a person sitting in a tiny chair reading at a microphone. It's fun. Moving on. The White One. Some of this information I got from my mom, since I was honestly too little to keep every detail straight. From the time I could form words, I used to talk about Woe. W-O. I was obsessed with him. I'd chatter on and on, telling my parents what he said and what games we played, what he liked. They thought it was cute, and I was the youngest of 3 boys, and they figured my brothers didn't really want to hang around with a toddler. So I made my own friend. That's right. It started getting weird, and my mom would find me, 2 or 3 years old, sitting cross-legged in the hallway, having full conversations with absolutely no one there, so I'd laugh and nod and tilt my head as if I was listening. I wasn't pretending to talk to a doll or anything. I was just looking at empty space. But to me, Woe was as real as anyone else in that house. It's a good name. Every meal, I insisted, Woe had a chair. Not just a chair, but his own napkin, his own cup. If we drove anywhere, I'd scream if they didn't buckle him in. They even ended up putting an old booster seat beside mine because I refused to leave him behind, and they had to say hi to him too, or I'd throw a fit for ignoring him. All of these in air quotes. I remember Woe. I saw him, and I swear I still do. Somewhere in the back of my mind, he was small, maybe just under 2 feet tall, shaped like a round little creature with short arms, short legs, and he was completely smooth and pure white, like someone made him out of a giant marshmallow. He didn't really have a face, but there were soft impressions where eyes and a mouth should have been. He never moved that I could see. I'd just blink and he'd be somewhere else. And he didn't talk out loud. I just knew what he was saying. One day I must have been 4 or so. Woe told me he wanted to show me something. I followed him to the back of the house where there was this old square wooden panel. It's like the kind with that simple latch. I'd never noticed it before, so I opened it. Inside was a cramped crawl space with a cracked cement floor. There was a single dusty rocking horse sitting there, like something forgotten for decades. I crawled in, sat down with my knees to my chest, and Woe was standing in the doorway. I can still picture it, him blocking the sunlight like a shape cut out of the world. When I told my parents about that place as an adult, they went pale. They said none of us kids were ever supposed to know about it. The floor inside drops off just a couple of feet in, straight down into wiring and old pipes. If I'd gone a bit further, they might not have found me. I don't know how I even knew it was there. Woe was with me for years. Never skipped setting his plate. Never took a car ride without him. Part of my life in a way I can't fully explain. And then we moved, and I remember that last day clearly. My mom picked me up, buckled me in the car, and turned around to get Woe. And I just lost it. I screamed, "He's not coming." And that was it. Never talked about him again for years, and if anybody mentioned him, I'd burst into tears. Years later, my mom told me a boy had died on the property decades earlier, some accident with the basement gas line. I don't know if I believe in ghosts, and I never felt afraid of Woe, and I still don't. It's just strange. He wasn't like the imaginary friends most kids have. Showed me a place I shouldn't have known. Stayed for years. Even now, part of me still remembers him standing in that doorway, quiet and white and still. And honestly, I kind of miss him. The Man in the Gray Coat. My family's lived in the apartment we're in now for almost 6 years. And honestly, it's been pretty chill. No creaky footsteps, no flickering lights. No random whispers in the middle of the night. And after some of the other horror movie bullshit that's happened in other places we've lived, it was honestly a blessing. But of course, that peace didn't last. My computer fan is going crazy. Settle down. Like a plane landing. 3 mornings ago, I was making oatmeal at like 7:30 a.m. You know, being a responsible adult or whatever. Both of my brothers were in their early shifts. Dad was out, Mom and her boyfriend passed out like usual. Everyone in this house sleeps like the dead, except me, I guess. Our apartment is shaped kind of like a long L. The door opens to a hallway with the living room and kitchen on the left. 2 bedrooms on the right, and at the end is the bathroom. Turn left again, and boom, my little cave of a bedroom. I was standing at the counter stirring my oatmeal, staring into nothing. When I caught sight of somebody in my peripheral vision, it was a man, tall and dressed in a long gray trench coat, matching hat, black boots. No gloves this time, just pale hands that looked strange. He walked down the hallway like he owned the place. Before he'd even passed the bathroom, he just blinked out. No fade, no sound, just gone. I whipped around so fast I nearly threw my spoon into the sink. And I swear to God, he wasn't see-through. He was solid. He walked like a normal person, shoulders slightly hunched forward, like someone late for a train. The only thing I couldn't make out was his face. The hat shaded it completely, like somebody turned the brightness down on just his head. My heart's just trying to break the sound barrier at that point, so it felt like somebody was breathing on the back of my neck. That kind of awareness where you just know someone's there. There's a gecko screaming in the distance. I don't scare easy, but this was new and awful. But also, I was hungry, so I dumped the oatmeal in a bowl and beelined it to my room like a coward. I've got a cat. His stuff's all in my room, so I couldn't close the door. Between Mystery Hat Man and dealing with my cat's artistic poop choices in the living room. Nice way to put that. A man was awaiting his doom, plopped on my bed. Kept flicking my eyes between the bowl and the door, and he showed up again. Not in the hallway, at my door. Same coat, same boots, same horrible face and the shadows thing. The door was half open, and he's about to step around it like somebody who didn't want to wake you up, but still broke into your house anyway. And then poof, gone again. I made some kind of pathetic wheezing noise. Imagine being halfway through a mouthful of lukewarm oatmeal while a ghost trespasses in your bedroom. Peak life moment. The feeling of being watched wrapped around me tighter. I decided to do nothing. Mostly because I didn't know what the hell to do. My cat eventually strutted in, completely unbothered. Animals are supposed to sense ghosts, but mine, he's as sharp as a damp sponge. Love him to death, though. Thought about closing the door, but that meant going toward where a trenchcoat man had just been. No thanks. 3rd time's the charm. Saw him again, exactly where he had vanished. Only this time he leaned back like he'd changed his mind about coming in and then gone again. The instant he disappeared, the feeling of being watched evaporated like nothing ever happened. I don't do drugs, I wasn't tired, drunk, or dehydrated. Just a guy trying to eat breakfast. Once again, making the narrator hungry. A day later, something else happened, and it was early again, 8:15. Brushing my teeth in the little sink in my room, and suddenly had this heavy urge to check the front door. We never lock it. Don't ask why, I don't know either. Stepped into the hall, and bam! Front door wide open. Again. My mom and her boyfriend just waking up, and I asked, and they rolled their eyes like it was a routine. Apparently, they'd found it wide open multiple times at random early hours. And then today, bathroom door in my room, it's one of those sliding wooden ones, decided to mess with me. Turned away for 3 seconds to fill my cat's water bowl, and the damn thing's wide open. Closed it, shrugged it off, went to do laundry. Came back 10 minutes later and the front door was open again, 10:32 a.m. on the dot. This place was quiet for years, and suddenly trenchcoat man shows up and the doors can't stay shut. I don't know what changed. Maybe something got bored, or maybe something woke up, but either way, I'm locking the damn door from now on. You're damn right. The door that shouldn't exist. Title needs an expletive after following the previous story. Anyway. Hey, I needed to talk to someone about this. I know it's weird to post on Reddit about something like this, but honestly, I'm shaken. And for context, when I was 11, I had a lot of problems with sleep, like actual medical level problems. Sleep studies and weird episodes and sleep paralysis, the whole nightmare package. Fast forward to today, and my mom's in the hospital after a stroke. Ugh. She's stable, but the fact that I can't visit because of COVID restrictions, well, that's been eating me alive. I decided to lie down next to my boyfriend, just to try and shut my brain off for a bit. And then everything got weird. This dream, or this place, it was crystal clear. I woke up in a narrow, yellow-tinted room with peeling wallpaper. The air smelled like chalk dust and something sour. Pushed open a creaky door, and outside were 5 people. 5, all staring at me like I'd just come back from the dead. They'd told me I'd be unconscious, or maybe in a coma, for who knows how long. We were trapped in an endless complex that felt like a mix between a university campus and an abandoned mall. They said they'd searched every hallway and every corner and every staircase, but nothing ever changed. Of course, I said, let's check again. I don't know why. Maybe because some part of me felt responsible. I didn't know their names, but they weren't strangers. Their faces were so familiar it hurt. Like they'd once been people I loved but forgot about. Well, we wandered for hours and maybe minutes, hard to tell. One guy in the group clearly didn't trust me. He wouldn't even walk near me. Something in me knew like we had a history, like bad history. And then I saw at a door. They swore it hadn't been there before. And above it a swirl of dark smoke hovered, shimmering like oil on water, and others hesitated and I didn't. Reached out and the mist vanished, but a stab of pain shot through my chest like a hot knife. Inside we found rows of locked doors, one small key that was tagged with the title of Dean's office. We followed winding corridors until the key fit. There were 2 desks inside. The distrustful guy lunged for one, and my gut told me, don't let him. I yanked open the other drawer first and found a heavy flashlight that doubled as a stun baton. When I pressed it, it crackled. Real, not dream real. Then a giggle, and it came from the hallway. I ran. Standing there was a girl. Short, messy hair, barefoot, and I'd seen her face before. I knew I had. Her eyes were sugar sweet, but behind them was something I can't put into words. What the hell are you? Someone behind me whispered. Not her again. It's been years. The girl tilted her head. You really don't remember, do you? She said my name like she'd known it all her life. I spat back. I'm not afraid of you anymore. Anymore? Why did I say that? She smirked. Liar, I can taste it on you. I swung the baton, and this time, unlike every other nightmare I've ever had, I hit her. Solid, sickening crack. She didn't even blink. I jabbed her with the stun, and she screamed. But then she laughed. You still can't hurt me. Not when I wear her face. Her word cut me open. Then darkness. I snapped awake in my bed, my boyfriend next to me. I thought I was safe, but the room melted away like wet paint, leaving only a black yard surrounded by tall fences. Her laughter echoed from nowhere and everywhere at once. I squeezed my eyes shut, begged to wake up. When I opened them, I'm back in another room. 2 figures in black hoods stood at the foot of the bed, and behind them a building, gray and crumbling. They grabbed my boyfriend like he weighed nothing. I clawed at his leg trying to hold on, and my strength bled out of me like water from a cracked glass. All of them muttered, "So that's what ties him here." And then nothing. When I opened my eyes again, I'm standing in what looked like a school fused with a shopping mall, and the signs overhead reading Wing A and Wing B and Wing C. A was for ordinary kids, B for the privileged, C off limits and closed. Some rich brat was yelling about it. I don't know why, but I snuck in anyway. The deeper it went, the colder it got. Walls grew damp and dark, and the top floor gave way to crackled concrete. And somewhere far down the hallway, that same giggle. And I woke up an hour ago. Hands are still shaking as I write this. I remember everything, every word, every shadow, every inch of that place. I don't know if it was just a dream anymore. The Thing in the Silence. Some months ago, my life was falling apart. I was drinking almost every night and smoking like it was the only thing keeping me breathing. I lived far away from my family, completely on my own, doing everything I knew they'd never approve of, and felt like freedom at the time until it didn't. One evening, my sister called me out of nowhere, and she already knew, and somehow they all knew. A week later, I'm packing my clothes, leaving behind my job, my so-called friends, and the poison I'd built my days around. The first week of being sober was a storm inside my head. My hands shook, my heart raced, and I couldn't stop imagining bottles hidden somewhere in the house. Even in my sleep, I'd dream of drinking again. Then sleep stopped coming at all. I lay awake every night, suffocating in my own mind. Eventually, I told her family doctor everything, under the promise that he'd keep it away from my parents. He listened quietly and then said that these were the classic symptoms of withdrawal. Told me it would ease over time and asked me to start meditating and learn how to hold my mind still instead of letting it drag me down. I didn't believe him at first, but I tried. Surprisingly, it kind of worked. After 2 weeks, I could reach a strange floating calm I've never felt without alcohol, push myself deeper into meditation. An hour would turn into 2 and became my night ritual, like closing a door to the noise of the world, and a month later I could drop into that state in seconds. But one night, something changed. I'd close my eyes, breathing slow, falling deeper than usual. Then in the dark behind my eyelids, something moved, and it wasn't just darkness. This was darker than dark, a shape, a pulse, and it grew bigger, like it was crawling toward me from somewhere far away. It was massive, covered in twisting shapes, its face a mess of something I can't describe. I froze, ripped myself out of the meditation, opened my eyes, gasping for air. My shirt was drenched in sweat. I told myself it's just my brain making things up, but it wasn't, and that was the beginning. I stopped meditating and started playing games to keep my mind busy. Then the whispers began, low and scattered voices, like someone was talking behind the walls. And every night I felt something lying beside me. The air turned cold, like frost creeping up my arms, and I could feel it. I just couldn't see it. Soon after, shadows began to flicker at the edge of my sight, quick but clear. They were there when I ate, when I showered, and when I worked. I blamed my mind, did it again and again until my belongings started moving on their own. A mug on the table, a book on the floor, different places every time. I tried filming it, but it never happened when I was ready. The only strange thing is my cravings are gone. Don't even want to drink anymore, I just want silence. Thing doesn't leave. Feel it getting closer each night. Doc says I'm fine, mentally and physically, but I hear the whispers and I see the shadows and I feel the cold. And it feels like it's waiting. The house that wore our faces. I once shared about how something in that house could mimic my mom, my sister, and me. And if you've ever felt a place stare back at you, you'll understand why I still think that patch of land was more than just haunted. The moments it pretended to be my mom were the ones that carved themselves deepest into me. So, the voice that wasn't hers. One evening, my dad and sister went out to get dinner. I stayed home, thinking Mom was upstairs. Dad called to ask what I wanted to eat, and I shouted, "Mom?" "Yeah?" "What do you want to eat?" "What?" I got annoyed and I stopped replying. My dad sounded puzzled through the phone. And that's when he told me Mom was with them the whole time and I was alone. Children that weren't there. Another day, sitting in the living room by myself, I heard kids laughing and running upstairs. Clear as day, I didn't even stop to really grab anything. Pulled it out the front door and walked fast to Grandma's house, shaking the whole way. The whisper. There was also this thing right next to my mom, or next to her exact sounding voice. I don't know why it was next to it, but okay, I think they mean, this thing, using their mom's exact voice, whispered my name right next to my ear. And that sound still crawls underneath my skin when I think about it. And that house, in many ways, built the distance between me and her. Nightmares didn't help. I dreamed that she entered my room, smiling gently and saying she wanted to talk, like after a calm apology. But when the doors closed, she shifted and grew into a monstrous wolf-like creature and lunged for me. The demon at the door. Dad had his own nightmare. He dreamed he saw a mom standing outside the glass door. Confused as to why she was there, he moved closer to open it and her face twisted and she threw herself at the door like something feral trying to claw its way in. And I once dreamed Dad and I are on a sort of narrow hanging bridge. He started swinging violently, trying to make me fall, and in real life he's my best friend. That house made love feel uncertain. Words no one said. Another evening during an argument, we heard my dad call me a terrible name. My mom and I spun around, shocked, and Dad stood there confused, and he swore he never said a word. Doors that moved themselves. Once, when Dad was home alone, he heard the door to the garage open and slam shut. He called out, got no reply, checked the locks, and everything was still shut tight. Another mommy. My sister had her own moments. She was in the master bathroom while Mom was brushing her hair. And suddenly she said, "Oh, look, another mommy." Mom froze, turned, and my sister quickly added, "Never mind, she's gone now." Doppelganger. I loved sneaking up on my sister, and more than once I heard her run into her room, only to fling the door open and find no one. The second time I stopped trying to explain it away. Mom sometimes caught a glimpse of a girl with long hair. Looked a lot like me, standing in my room. Once, Grandma saw me dart into the kitchen. She called me, but the sound of my footsteps came from the staircase behind her. The house that didn't want to be empty. After we all moved out, Dad stayed alone for a while. He said it grew louder, and more footsteps upstairs, and more thuds and more voices. Things shifted places, and one night he swore he saw something with a beast's shape crouched in the dark. The last time I saw that house, as we drove away, it felt like it exhaled, almost pleased we were leaving. And I swear, it felt like losing. Brace yourselves for, I still quite frankly don't know if it's a earlier version of my delivery when they told me to speak in a high-pitched voice to match the British guy that originally was hired to do this job. Or if it's not even me, it's confusing because I don't recognize anything. But you should try to make them just have me do 2 hours rather than play old versions of me at the end. Request that. You've got a voice. I sort of have a voice too, but not in this matter. Sweet dreams. See ya.
Embark on a journey of discovery with us at Paranormal M. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to explore stories that challenge the norm. Get ready to be intrigued by our latest narratives. The Girl Standing at the Front Door. When I was 11 years old, my dad took me and my brother to a party. He apparently knew the people, but me and my brother didn't. They had just moved into this house, and that was what the party was for. After about an hour, a man came up to me and a group of kids, asking us to go to his house to grab some more firewood because we were running out. Us, all being trusting kids, all said okay, and we ran to have fun. I remember feeling uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside and kept moving onward until I reached the house. Each person grabbed 2 pieces of wood, but I only grabbed one because I felt that I was too small to carry 2 pieces. Everyone got mad at me and said it was only fair, so I went back for another piece. I made them pinky promise not to leave me, but when I came back out, they were all gone. Realizing I was alone, I started to panic because I didn't know my way back. I'd never been here before. I started to scope out the area thinking somebody had to stay behind with me, but no one was there. I was about to give up and aimlessly walk around looking for my way home when suddenly I saw a girl standing by the front door. She had big curly red hair, big blue eyes, red little freckles, and a white nightgown. She wore nothing on her feet. She looked like one of the girls in the group, so I called out to her, but she just stood silently, staring off blankly. The more I stared at her, the more her body seemed to fall apart. Her hair seemed missing in certain areas. She was skin and bones thin. She had twigs and leaves in her hair, and her skin was pale and soaked. I feared she was getting too cold, So I shouted over to her, shouted again. She ignored me. Finally, I took a step toward her and she smiled. Her eyes went jet black and empty. She turned around and ran inside laughing. I followed her and searched the whole house for half an hour. When I came back out, everybody had come back for me, asking where I was. I was panicked and I told them about the injured girl that needed help. They just looked at me confused. They assured me that there was no girl before laughing at me like I was bonkers. I kept telling them about it and they were just as confused as I was. We went back to the party and acted like nothing happened. But I had this bad feeling, so I went to the mom in the party and told her the whole story, and she asked about the man that sent us for more wood, because they never needed more in the first place. I gave her description. Well, she said that that man had never been to the party. She didn't know who I was talking about. She gathered all of us who told the same story about the same man. She said that she didn't know who he was, but she was drunk and didn't seem too worried. So she just told us to be safe. The Hat Man I described before in these forums was not actually the quote-unquote Hat Man. Turns out the apparition that I saw that night is not the Hat Man at all, but a trapped spirit. Let me explain. This is actually good news, at least for most of the people who have seen this being in night terrors and paralysis. I have no idea what it means for me in this point onwards. In my older account, I came back after a 3-year hiatus on Reddit and replied to a post to someone describing a solid black apparition that I saw several years ago. I described it as having an oversized fedora hat with a large overcoat. All of it solid black. Indeed, a blacker than night description by someone else in the forum, and how it looks much like the profile of the burglar on one of those neighborhood night watch number trespassing signs, located sporadically throughout close-knit middle upper-class neighborhoods in the early 80s. That's how it was described by somebody else. And I thought at the time, I couldn't have described it better. I then got all these replies about the Hat Man. One after another, after commenting on a person's post about apparitions that we saw. I had no idea about this phenomenon, and I was extremely puzzled on why I didn't see this in sleep paralysis. But at 8 p.m. at night, while the group of people in a semi-public building, I didn't know what all that really meant, and then I theorized that perhaps this is perhaps a multi-dimensional being and not a spirit. And if the world of dreams is a dimension all in itself, then this being can perhaps travel in between dimensions at will, regardless. It's good conjecture. When I was taking a break from this forum, which I do a lot because of negativity, I was just browsing through YouTube channels, and after I was done watching one documentary, I was surprised to see the name of the building of where I saw this Hat Man on the head title of a documentary that was going to autoplay next. I watched the show with only mild interest, since I was taking a break from the sub, and within 5 to 8 minutes into the documentary, I saw it. A very old photograph of a man. Very old, I mean Napoleonic era times old. With that exact hat I described before, oversized, large fedora stovetop hat, perched on his head with a very large overcoat being worn. I gasped. For real, I really did. I couldn't believe it, for even though I saw it as a solid black apparition, there was no doubt in my mind those were the clothes it was wearing when I saw it that night. My blood ran cold and I got sick for over an hour. The quote-unquote blood ran cold. It's an expression, but the sickness is not. There was way more to this person than I ever thought possible. He was an alleged serial killer executed on the grounds of this building I was at. Perhaps that's one of the reasons why I got sick. The intuitive glands working on overdrive. Or maybe it's just my preconceived prejudices of the situation. I'm not claiming any special psychic ability, merely intuition. Speaking of preconceived notions, what if it showed itself to me because he was actually innocent, doomed to walk the grounds of this old building for multiple centuries since the day of his execution? Also, if he is guilty of the crimes he's accused of, I would think being trapped for over 200 years as a spirit doesn't seem to match the karma of a vicious killer, at least from a philosophical standpoint. In the East, there is no distinction between religion and philosophy, my father's teacher being a Tibetan Buddhist monk. The punishment does not fit the crime from the metaphysical sense, and perhaps being wrongly accused has made him a tortured soul. Perhaps he was wrongly accused and was thus executed, all of his money and property being forfeit. That would make me a real pissed-off spirit if I ever say so myself. I won't say the name of this place, nor the name of this alleged serial killer. The sleuths out there who are motivated by delving into dark history may find out the place I'm speaking of. I did slip up once, and I mentioned it a long while back. I'm going to try to find out if he's innocent or a killer, first by historical research, and then who knows after that. I was thinking about seeing if anyone here wanted to team up and go to this place or simply take turns on sessions. Skeptic or believer alike will be welcome for this project. This would be a great opportunity for each side to find some answers by working on a project together, with both sides having equal motivation in solving the case. As well, perhaps shutting down the discussion in question on whether EVPs are fake, misidentified, pareidolia, or random radio waves, or all the above. Even if it's just for a couple of weeks, that would be remarkable. Unusual activity the day my dad had died. Growing up, him and I watched ghost adventures, paranormal caught on camera, horror movies. You name it, we probably watched it together. He died December 15th, 2021. He died from his third time with cancer. On December 15th, 2021, I woke up and sat up exactly at 9:30 a.m. Not missing a beat, my mom walked in and announced the news. He was pronounced dead at 9:30 a.m. Oddly enough, 3 light bulbs died out of nowhere in the main bathroom. That day, December 15th, was also particularly very windy and stormy. 3 shingles were blown off the house. Weird, right? After the morgue people came and got my dad's body, and a priest came to console my mom and I, very nice of him. After everybody left, I went to go change the light bulbs in the bathroom. I go downstairs to the basement to look for the good bulbs. I felt a shoe hit the back of my leg. I turn around and the shoes that are kept by the landing were being picked up and chucked at me down the stairs. I initially thought that it had to be the cat knocking them down. But no cats around. They were literally levitating and coming at me. Honestly, I thought it was funny, like my dad had his strength and sense of humor again. Also, he owed me a paranormal experience after all the years of ghost documentaries that we used to watch. Entity walking around the house. Hey everybody. So I had to sleep on the couch downstairs because my bed is broken, and I heard some weird sounds. So at 11 p.m. I decided it was a good time to stop working on homework and go to sleep. I spent about an hour talking to my friends, texting on the couch, and then attempted to go to sleep for real. It took me until around 1 a.m. to find a good position and also to ignore people messaging me. I decided on me facing on the couch and my back exposed, because it's hot as fuck in Texas. So anyways, 5 minutes later, everything was really quiet, and I heard the floor creak upstairs like when somebody moves on the bed. I just thought it was my mom and sisters moving around in their bed. They're all asleep in the same bed, and the room is right above the living room, which is where I was sleeping. I hear it more and more until I hear someone actually stepping off the bed, and I guess moving. Again, I just thought it was my mom. I also heard someone being in the kitchen and moving around the stuff that we had cleaned, but not put away, and just overall walking in that area. There was some loud, like pan clashing noises. And that's when I decided to turn around and cover myself fully with my blanket and try to go to sleep. At that point, it was like 2 a.m. I heard whatever was there go upstairs and kind of just walk around. So that's what I heard. When we were having breakfast, I asked my mom if she had gone downstairs or something. She usually does to go get the baby a smoothie so she can go back to sleep. But she said she didn't at all. I told her what I had heard during the night and that I didn't sleep well at all, and she looked at me shocked. So here's what my mom said when she heard or experienced this. My mom said that around 12 a.m. she went to her computer to work on some stuff, and that the whole time she was there, she heard me gaming in my room, like me laughing and my loud keyboard clicking, for basically the whole duration of her working. That she even told me to shut up, but she said I didn't reply and just thought it was because I was wearing earbuds, which does happen when I'm gaming, to be honest. Anyways, at some point she heard me stop, and she looked in my little sister's room to see if I went to sleep there. Didn't see me, and she was kind of sad that I had walked past her without saying goodnight and how quiet I supposedly was going downstairs. She didn't even notice. She was really good at hearing for that, and I had been downstairs since 11 p.m. And at that point, she said she noticed at like 2 a.m. When she was going to bed, she said that she heard walking all over upstairs, and that around 2:40 a.m. she started hearing like hard galloping outside in our backyard. So as a person would do, I tried to rationalize it, then and now. And in the moment, I thought it was my mom, but obviously it wasn't fully her walking or doing stuff. Thought it was maybe the dog, but it sleeps outside and he's pretty quiet and actually sleeps as long as it's not really mating season. But there's nothing to explain the galloping. My mom checked the backyard cameras and they saw nothing at all. She was also upstairs the whole time and didn't see anyone. I also found it kind of weird that we couldn't hear each other despite how aware we were. Like my notification sound is a loud-ass sound. And it sounded at like 1:30 a.m. I had to turn it off or I would have not been able to sleep. Surely my mom would have heard it, and it sounded twice. She said that she didn't hear anything like that, and from where we were located at those times, she would definitely have. I should have also heard her calling my name and telling me to be quiet to go to sleep, which she did loudly so I could hear her from the office to my room. We honestly don't know what's going on, and we're both quite scared. We're planning on dousing the upstairs and downstairs with holy water. Right now I have to go to class, so my mom's driving me, and her boyfriend, who's Muslim, gave us some prayers to play over the TV while we're gone to try to help. If y'all find some reasonable explanation, please repost it. Or what this might mean. Really shook my mom hearing the horse gallop as it went around 3 times, and each time it goes louder. I'm wondering if this is like an urban legend or something that might have meaning. You know, hearing loud galloping at 3 a.m. Outside opinions or thoughts. First post. Not necessarily an encounter, but certainly scary. I'll also point out before starting the story, that this may be a little all over the place, so to speak, or discombobulated, so I apologize. And number 2, that I've never been scared of cemeteries at all, or the deceased for that matter. I've always found cemeteries to be peaceful, even at night. Crazy, I know. I had to spend much of my young life knowing I was going to be a mortician. And while I haven't gotten there yet due to money and school stuff, I hope to be soon. But let me jump right into this. So my girlfriend and I usually go to the cemetery when her roommates are in the dorm at her school, and there's 4 of them. So we go quite often to the cemetery to, well, you can use your imagination to guess. But that's clearly not the point of this story. But to us, it's no big deal. I've never gotten a bad feeling there before, and neither has she. But this cemetery is off the beaten path. And I've been creeped out there, maybe. But nothing bad, not anything that sticks with me. However, tonight, it was different. I could feel it when it pulled up. But I was no big deal, I thought. Well, we do our thing, and we usually just sit and talk for a few minutes after, because, like I said, this place is off the beaten path in a rural area. But tonight, we both, without even talking to each other, just got ready quick and got up to the front of my Buick. And as I was getting situated trying to get my coffee cup in the cup holder and stuff, I look over and my girlfriend's crying. She says calmly, "We need to go now." And I said, "Okay." And I was still screwing with my cup trying to get it situated in the little cup holder, and she yells, "You're not fucking hearing me, fucking drive now." This may be a time to point out that she doesn't swear at all, hardly. But like I said, I had the feeling the whole time we were there, but hearing her panic and knowing that she just was that panicked had me scared to death. "I'll never go back there," she agreed. I don't know what this was, but it was tangible. You could feel the sensation of, if you don't leave now, you're going to die, accompanied with the very feeling of being watched. It's been an hour now, and I'm still shaken as she is. We both had a feeling of dread and doom for a while after leaving, and we stopped at a gas station to get some water and get our bearings together. I'm not sure what happened, but I don't want to go back there. I've only felt this way once before. If you made it this far, thank you so much. If you have any idea, kindly post them in the comments. You heard the man, folks. In the comments section, boost that algorithm for me. My first ever paranormal experience, which made me a believer, but I'm still skeptical. This happened just 3 months ago. I was trying to sleep at around noon and just pulling an all-nighter. The moment I fell asleep, I started suffering from sleep paralysis. I had people in my house and all sorts of noises were also coming through. I tried very hard to open my eyes, but I couldn't. I was fully aware. I could make out where I was, who was talking and saying what and everything, but I couldn't open my eyes for a while. Then I did open my eyes, and I literally saw a black, shadowy figure running back and forth in the room. It was black and smoky. I couldn't make out its body, but it seemed small and kind of shapeless. Then I said some prayers and tried to sleep, and I started dreaming immediately. I saw that I'm in a war, wounded, and I'm fearing that I'm going to get captured by the enemies. And I know they'll torture me horribly, dismember me and all. Then I woke up again and felt something touch my face. And that was the point where I believed that I'm not alone in the room. I was terrified, but I forced myself to wake up and stayed awake for the rest of the day. Then, a couple of days later, I was trying to sleep in my room. Previously, I was not in my room, and my room is secluded from the other rooms. So I'm all alone, and I was about to fall asleep, and I felt a sharp pain on the side of my chest, as if someone's pushing a finger against it. I felt the pain and I woke up, turned to see who it is. I saw a human figure standing right next to my bed. I thought it's one of my cousins, and I also tried to ask who it is, because I couldn't make out in the dark, and then I woke up fully and realized it's gone and there's no pain at all. I was scared, but I dismissed it and slept, and right then I felt somebody grab my neck with their cold hand, and I stood right away, turned on all the lights in a panic, and noped my way out of the room to where my siblings were hanging out. I was telling them all about what just happened. I told them I can't sleep in my room, so I'm just going to sleep on the sofa for the night in the living room. These were the two main and very realistic incidents, but I felt taps on my shoulder multiple times after this, and I still have skepticism about the incidents. Was it paranormal, or could it be something in my head? I don't know, but I'm just a guy, and I don't know for certain what that was. Still can't explain experience from several years ago. I was talking to my wife today, and an experience that we had came up, which we still can't explain. In February of 2013, we were dating at the time, we decided to take a weekend trip to a resort in Lake Delavan in Wisconsin. The weather was cold, but not unusually so we thought it would be a neat getaway. To set the stage, the place was pretty much deserted when we arrived. It's mostly a summer attraction for families from Illinois to come and vacation. There's a beach where you can go swimming and also a nearby golf course. People also frequently use the resort for weddings. However, when we were there was a thick layer of snow on the resort grounds, and the lake was frozen over from months of sub-freezing temperatures. Not even Valentine's Day was enough to attract more than a handful of guests. We checked in and we were directed to our room, which was about 2/3 of the way down a long, deserted hallway. The hallway had a line of rooms on the left side which faced the lake. Walking to the room was kind of eerie because we passed an arcade that was completely deserted and there was no sign of anyone else staying in that wing for the night. The hallway was completely empty and silent. When we arrived at the room, it seemed nice enough and had a pretty view of the frozen-over lake. There was one bed adjacent to the wall, nearest the bathroom, which was on the right side when you entered the room. We decided to go out and walk on the ice, as my wife was from a warmer climate and had never done so before. When we returned, the first strange thing happened. As I opened the door to our room, I realized I'd left the light on. However, it abruptly turned off when we entered. It looked like one of those lights that has a timer and a motion sensor, so I dismissed it as a coincidence. The rest of the evening was pretty uneventful. We went to dinner at the resort restaurant and had a couple of glasses of wine. We were pretty tired, so we ended up going to bed pretty early. I awoke at 3 a.m. with an uneasy feeling. The room felt like somebody turned the heat off. As I shook off the fogginess of sleep, I noticed a figure standing next to the bed. My hair stood up as I tried to make out what it was. A woman with dark hair and a light-colored dress who was sort of glowing. Before I could make out any more details, she dissipated. I dismissed this as a dream and eventually drifted back to sleep. About an hour later, I woke again with the same feeling. She was back. However, this time I was able to make out more details. She appeared to be Native American and had braided hair with a light-colored traditional dress. I didn't get the sense that she wanted to harm me. She eventually dissipated again without saying anything or really moving. As I lay in bed, paralyzed by what I experienced, my wife abruptly sat up. Thinking she was awake, I said, "Honey, are you up?" Got no response. Her eyes were still closed, and she laid back down again. Later, she would tell me that she didn't have any memory of doing this. I didn't go to sleep for a long time after that night, but also didn't experience anything else. The next morning, we woke up and we were laying in bed talking. We hadn't been dating for that long at the time, and I was afraid of making her think I was crazy by telling her what happened. Finally, I decided to do it and see if she remembered anything from the night before. As I recounted my story, the lights on the headboard above us flickered on and off. They were turned off at the time, so I found this to be very strange. Later that morning, we went into the bathroom and also noticed that the sink was on full blast. Neither of us recalled even using the sink that morning. We checked out that day and asked the hotel receptionist in passing whether or not the resort had any reports of being haunted. I expected them to laugh it off, but instead, I got a very defensive vibe and denial from them. I later researched the lake and resort and found out that the grounds were home to Native American burial mounds and were known to be haunted. I had no idea that that was the case before we went. I even found a post discussing how staff reported seeing a woman in a white dress who would wander the halls of the resort. Dream visitation from my dog that passed away. Last night I had a dream of my dog who passed away about 2 months ago. My dog died very, very suddenly. He got sick randomly, and within 3 days he had to be put down due to having brain cancer and tumors. He was in otherwise perfect health, fairly young, and just an overall happy dog. It was extremely traumatizing and took weeks and weeks for me to come to terms with it. Sometimes it still doesn't feel real. Let me start with, I am spiritual and I believe in the paranormal. I'd like to believe this was a visitation, but either way it was very comforting. In my dream, I was in a forest. It was very bright and green about midday, and it was right at that sweet spot temperature where it's not too hot and not too cold. There was a calm pond of water near us. He was in my arms, so happy to see me. He had his happy ears on. His ears were pressed against his head, and his tail was wagging so hard his butt was wiggling. He wasn't whimpering or yelping anymore like he was before we had to put him down. He was yelping with excitement like he used to when he'd see me, and he was kissing my face nonstop with his super stinky breath. I remember feeling his hind legs and being so happy when we could move them without pain. He lost the use of his back legs in the last few hours. Everything was super real feeling, and I rarely have dreams that feel so realistic. It felt like I was actually holding him, and no other dogs quite felt like him. The strangest part of this dream was that I was aware this wasn't happening in my day-to-day reality. I knew that this was just in passing, like my Pongo was dead, and when I woke back up, he would still be gone. I didn't feel sad, though. I was so unbelievably happy. I heard a thought in my head that wasn't actually my thought, but it wasn't anything I heard out loud either. It was something along the lines of, I'm happy and at peace. I am no longer in pain. I struggled with guilt ever since I put him down. It felt like I just could have done more to prevent it. Or if that I've given him more time, he would have been able to pull through. The reality was that it was his time. He wasn't a good candidate for any form of treatment, and he wouldn't have gotten better with no treatment. It was so nice to see him again and hold him again, though. Urgent. Scratching at door, and nothing's there. The time's currently 1 a.m., and approximately an hour ago, I got out of the shower to see my boyfriend grabbing his gun from his bedroom. When I asked him what was going on, he told me he heard a clear scratching noise on our front door. He and I, both being decently superstitious, ran to ensure all doors and windows were locked before checking the peephole. And after a few minutes, we opened the door and found nothing there. Our next-door neighbor leaves for work at 10 p.m., and stays within his apartment this late otherwise, and our downstairs neighbor just moved, so there's no chance of a neighbor noise being mistaken as something else. Both pets were also accounted for, had been nowhere near the door, so there's also no chance there. After some time, we went to get snacks and turn on a movie, and shortly after it started, we heard a very light tapping near the top of the door, and what could have been some sort of contact with the door handle. Still nothing in the peephole, and so we paused the movie to listen. Right before I was going to play the movie again, there was a very clear scratching near the bottom of the door. For the both of us to witness this time, it's been about 15 minutes since the noise, and we restarted the movie, reassuring ourselves that if there was anything to be concerned about, our reactive watchdog would warn us. The cat's been staring at the door and just uncharacteristically ran to jump at whatever appears to be nothing in the living room window. Is there any explanation for this? Paranormal or not, I'd like one, and hopefully for some knowledge of how to fix this issue, or at least how to provide some kind of comfort so we aren't paranoid all night. Strangest sound I've ever heard in my life. This happened to me quite a few years ago. I was probably around 11 years old. I'm 19 now. I used to enjoy making blanket forts and sleeping in them. This particular night, I decided I was going to make one in my mom's room. I would sleep in my mom's room pretty often at that age. All was good. I was just hanging out in my fort, browsing Yahoo Answers because I was a weird kid. I don't remember ever what exactly I was doing when this happened, but all of a sudden I heard the most horrifying sound. I've never heard something like this again, and I can't describe it for the life of me. It was unlike anything I've ever heard before. I was wide awake, and I don't believe I was dreaming or anything. I remember it like it was yesterday, because it scared me that bad. It was loud. My mom's the lightest sleeper ever, but she didn't even move a muscle. She swore that she was going to wake up, but she didn't react. Or I swore she was going to wake up, but she didn't react. It was so loud, like whatever made the noise was right beside me. It didn't sound natural. I can't explain it well. Like I said, I have genuinely tried to find anything that replicated what I heard in any way, but I truly have never heard anything like it. I guess it sounded like a shriek from an animal, maybe. It went on for maybe 5 or 8 seconds, and then radio silence. I also wasn't the kind of kid to spook at weird noises. I always brushed everything off, like the house settling or whatever. But this paralyzed me with fear so bad I don't think I moved an inch for 5 minutes. Then I tore down the blankets, hopped in my mom's bed, and hid underneath the covers the whole night. I live in a quiet neighborhood with little to no neighbors. I also don't have a huge forest around me where wildlife may be. I have no explanation, and to anybody reading this or hearing it, it probably doesn't sound that scary compared to other experiences, and people will tell me it was an animal. It was a TV in another room, but trust me, I've looked into every possible explanation, and I truly have no idea. I've never heard something so horrifying that sent me into shock so fast. Maybe it was nothing, but it still shakes me to my core, and I'll always remember it because I remember the pure fear I felt in that moment. My childhood teenager experiences. When my neighbor had died, I was about 8 to 10 years old, and I was sitting alone at home for almost all day because my parents were working till evening. Meanwhile, I had early sleep time, and my spare time was while they had been in absence. I was hearing steps going downstairs a few times, with a shoe on, so it's loud and a characteristic sound. I was feeling watched. As evening approached, I was choosing for myself a room to sit in, usually the living room with television or the guest room with the computer. I was putting on the screen or something loud so I wouldn't be hearing any other sounds, and I was staring at these devices basically like a horse, because sometimes I was seeing shadowy figures in the corner of my eyes. I was concentrating on staring only in front of my vision without moving my head or my body, to not let anything be seen or heard. Sometimes windows and doors were closing and opening, but it could be a draft, and after these experiences I was too scared to check anyway. One day my grandpa had visited me, and when he heard these openings, he asked me if there's anything upstairs, a thief potentially, and I just answered, I don't know, thinking I'm just gonna go check with Grandma. She went alone, closed all the windows, and it was good. I lived in my family home for 20 years, and these drafts were happening after my neighbor died, and never before or after, so I still find them unusual. I don't live in an area where storms or tornadoes can happen also. One day in the evening, in a day where my family were grilling and socializing, I had been playing on a swing, and I saw a very light, a concentrate of a shape of a circle, a figure flying fastly above me. I stopped playing and I asked if they seen something, and they told me nope. I probably just misunderstood what I saw, so I just went back. After some time, that bulb of light flew again, and it was much closer to me, so bigger too, and I got too scared to play. When I was older, a teenager, I learned to sleep in only one position, always the same side and facing the narrow of the bed, so if I opened my eyes, I was seeing only wall. That's because I was having lucid dreams, sleep paralysis, and nightmares almost every night. I don't want to be describing sleep paralysis because they are very similar for everyone. However, during them, I was seeing dark shadows chasing me. Sometimes I was feeling molested by them. They were touching me or lying on me, and they were calling my name. These times were the first when someone or something touched me like that ever. That sounds terrifying, but after I woke up, I just went back to sleep because that was only affecting me while it was happening. What scared me were things I experienced when I wasn't in sleep paralysis. Once I saw a very bright light, which looked like a phone with a flash measured at me. I was hearing voices when I could move, so I wasn't asleep. My name, "Come here," from a room I was most afraid of because of its energy. And one time I had to make a phone call to my friend, which was like an emergency because I heard something stretching my door. Scratching my door. And a repeated melody signed by a chorus and a few voices, and I was, shh, everyone's sleeping, shh, everyone's sleeping. Well, I wasn't, and I was terrified because I was fully aware. I want to mention one dream, I think, where I was watching my own body from the room's corner, and I could move by think. I was seeing a 360 degree. That was interesting, because I can't even imagine looking in that wide vision, but I remember what I was seeing them. My body, some furnitures, walls, and ceiling, everything at once. At one sunny day, we went as a family to a bike trip, and I saw a male looking druggy in a dirty clothes, staring at me with fully dilated pupils. His eyes were black and seemed empty. I asked my family if they saw him. They told me no. Crying face emoji. I asked for every other person that we used to omit, and they confirmed they presence. Sorry, I'm reading this as is. Because of that, I was suicidal. During that time, I was having a dream where creatures looking like humans were transporting me out of my house, and they were talking with me. They were tall, physically attractive. Their energy was calming, understanding, full of love, I think, and very self-awarenesses, but also kind of robotic. At my last dream with them, they asked me if I want to join them or if I prefer to come back to Earth. I answered I prefer Earth because I have a human body. I'm used to entertainment, to culture, to society, but I don't think I would be able to with that body and blocked mind. to perceive Earth's reality, to adapt to their conditions. He smiled at me and I woke up, feeling like I want to shit myself because that was so unreal. Psychiatrics used to assing my depression pills that weren't working. Psychiatrics used to assing my depression pills that weren't working. That's what it says. But I felt light after hypnosis sessions with a certified hypnoser. I don't experience any nightmares, any paralysis, and strange things in general anymore. I sleep well and I'm happy. That's what happened in my childhood. These experiences don't affect me anymore, but they were real when they were happening. My point is not to seek for validations or to deny that. I just wanted to share my perception at times. Will my friend be able to see the texts I sent him after his passing? My friend recently passed. We went to school together, graduated together, and attended college together. He passed at just 23 years old. He was taken suddenly and way too soon. I didn't get a chance to say goodbye, and it sounds like he was in a lot of emotional pain at the end. He often didn't feel loved. I sent him a series of text messages yesterday after his memorial, burial, and wake. I just feel like he needs to hear how much he helped his friends over the years and how much we appreciate him. And that I'm so sorry that I wasn't there for him, but that I hope he could feel us there with him yesterday. I'm not sure if I believe in an afterlife in the Christian sense. I think that we either cease to exist or live in an eternal peace once we pass. We went to a Christian high school, though, and I feel like if anybody deserved an eternity of bliss and peace, it would be him. Is it possible for the deceased to feel or know that we sent them these wishes? Or to sense sadness, love, and regret? I just don't want him to feel like he wasn't loved. He was an amazing person and deserved the world. My sister woke me up at 3:26 a.m. to tell me she felt like she was being yanked away. Not safe for work warning. You've been warned. Don't blame me. My sister, M, 28. I'm gonna just call her Mary. That's the narrator just putting a name in here. I don't like reading letters. And I, N, I'm gonna go with Nate, came to visit our family here in Mexico. When we were younger, weird things happened, but as we got older, we brushed them off as coincidences and wild imagination. Just to be safe, Mary and I shared the same room and the same bed. Even though there's 2 full beds in the room, we haven't had any bad experiences until tonight. Around 11ish tonight, a fight broke out between the 2 of us. She yelled, I yelled, and we ended up physically fighting. We told each other off and somehow managed to stay in the same bed. I mention this because it's absolutely not typical behavior for us, because it's the only thing that's different from the other nights here. At 3:26 a.m., Mary tapped me on my shoulder and was shaking. Her eyes were wide open, looking past me. Instantly, I hugged her, and she latched onto me, crying into my chest. She asked me to look and see if there was something behind her. Her body was literally attached to mine, so I had to lift my body to peek. Nothing. Through her sobs, she managed to tell me that something tried to take her. She said that she was sleeping, woke up and felt her body extremely heavy. She could see me sleeping face up, but I seemed far away. As she was trying to process what was going on, she felt a massive yank that she described as her soul being pulled. She compared it to what she imagines being kidnapped feels like. Feeling scared, shocked, vulnerable, uncertain of where you're headed. At this point, she's on one bed and I'm on the other, facing each other. As she's crying and sharing her experience, we hear a chime from a bell coming from behind her. She leapt onto me in a fraction of a second. I got up to try to see if it was something that could have just fallen or maybe moved. Again, nothing. As I'm walking back, we hear it again, and this time a bit fainter and from a lower point, somewhere closer to the wall facing the bedheads. It's now 5:50 a.m. We had a family member say a prayer and come to sleep in the extra bed. None of us can sleep. That's why it's in parentheses. She keeps trying to throw up to shake the bad feeling that she has in her stomach. We aren't really sensitive to ghosts or spirits. To be honest, we're skeptical of the paranormal. I'd love to dismiss this as sleep paralysis, but this was more than just not being able to move. She's literally sick now, and the bells. Also, it's 3:26 a.m. Or also, the 3:26 a.m. thing somehow stands out to me. I feel like it's somehow important. Does anyone have any insight into what this could mean? My best friend is convinced that I'm possessed, and I'm afraid he might be right. I've grown up very religious. I consider myself a Christian and strong in my faith. I also believe in a very powerful spiritual energy in the world, one that isn't exactly spoken about in the Bible, but I believe it to be true. I'm 19 years old and I've struggled with insomnia, severe depression, and anxiety since I was very young. By the age of 8 years old, I believed it was just normal for every little kid to want to kill themselves. It was just another one of those things that kids aren't supposed to talk about. I often had terrible nightmares and have placed them in a place I affectionately call them the vault. The vault is a coping mechanism of mine that I've always had. I also have PTSD from a variety of events, but I didn't know about some of them until I underwent hypnotherapy, which was quite a shock. This vault will be important later. I've recently been having a very strange feeling, like I'm in a trance, like I suddenly gained consciousness in the middle of a common pastime or activity, or a feeling of déjà vu or a memory that never happened. One of these occurrences I remember very vividly dying. I don't remember how, but I remember the actual death, what it felt like. Then nothing. Like, literally nothing. Then the next thing I know, I'm trucking along a hiking trail. I feel like the death occurrence is somewhere in the vault. Next, we have my best friend. He's another strong Christian, and he has a hypothesis that there's something in me causing my depression. I often get these thoughts, and I don't call them voices because they're not audible, but they are certainly not my main conscious. They often take control of my train of thought. My train of thought often goes like this. What a beautiful day. Some days aren't that great, though. I should off myself. That's just the default, out of the blue. Kill yourself. 10 years of this and it's more of an annoyance than anything. My therapists and psychiatrists have all said that my depression is because of a chemical imbalance in my brain. The same reason I have insomnia, but none of them have really told me anything about these thoughts, nor could they explain them. The Bible gives Christians the authority to drive out demons. The other day, my friend and I were driving. We started talking about this, and he said, I'm going to try something. And he put a hand on me, and he said, in the name of Jesus Christ, get out of my friend. I expected to feel nothing. I haven't told him this, but felt an incredible sense of humor, anger, and disgust. Just an absolute swelling urge to mock him and the name of Christ. I resisted. Next thing I know, it's gone. I feel normal again. I also have involuntary movement. I don't have Tourette's or neurological disorder, but my body just twitches, jerks, or shakes at random. Most commonly when I'm driving or in church. Sorry for going on for so long. I know this was a bit of a mess, but honestly, I'm quite scared. Visited by my guardian angel in a dream. So it's April 2020. I'd recently fractured my leg and I had to keep it immobilized in my bed as it healed. A friend of mine's father had contracted COVID and was being kept in ICU, the intensive care unit. They were in critical condition. He was deeply concerned for his father's well-being, as the staff had said the chances of pulling through were slim. He and his mother would cry, expecting to hear the worst as his father's respiratory function was declining. My friend informed me of the situation one evening, and I was too worried on my friend's behalf. I then went to sleep. I should preface this by saying I'm no stranger to vivid dreams, at least pre-pandemic and during lockdown. But nowadays, they are few and far in between. In my dream, I was in my room, but there was no light or color. I could still see the objects in my room, but everything was in black and white. Sort of like I had infrared vision. I quickly noted someone sitting at the edge of my bed. It was a Caucasian man in his mid-30s, with what looked like blonde hair wearing a gray pinstripe suit. I felt a calming presence emanating from him, and he smiled at me. I then sat up from my side of the bed, at which point the man spoke. Now, I'm from South Asia, and it's not often you see Caucasian people speaking my mother tongue, but what he said to me still sticks with me today. He gave me a simple instruction. Pray. Upon finishing speaking, he placed his hand on my forehead and gently pushed my head back onto my pillow. I instantly jolted back from my bed and took note of the time. It was 4 a.m. on the dot on my alarm clock. I didn't recognize the name of the person the man was referring to when he was telling me to pray. But given the fact that I am religious, I decided to pray for this person regardless. A few days later, my family informed me that my father's friend had made a rapid recovery and has now been discharged from the hospital. I told my mother about the experience, and upon mention of the name, she had a look of shock on her face. The name was what my friend's father was known by in his childhood. To this day, I'm convinced that the man I saw in my dreams was my guardian angel, or at least an angel of sorts, who wanted me to pray on my friend's father's behalf. I haven't had any subsequent experiences of the sort, but I suppose it's comforting to know that there's somebody watching over me. I used to see things, but the scariest one I think of often. When I was younger, I used to be very in tune with my ability to see beyond the living. For example, my mother had an aunt who I had met one time. She was at my grandparents' new house, leaning against the support column on the front porch, watching me play in the front yard. She had a very warm, white, and inviting smile. I vividly remember her outfit being a white t-shirt that was tucked into her waist-height pants and all white shoes. What stood out most was her golden cross necklace. She waved to me and I waved at her back. A few weeks ago, my mom was looking through family albums, and she showed me a photo of my great aunt. I told her I remembered her, and I had met her before when I was about 7 years old. My mom was taken aback because, come to find out, her aunt had died in May of 1996, 2 months before I was born. The one thing I saw as a child will forever haunt me, Wonder what it was. I want to say I was about 4 or 5. It's very blurry to me. I was born with a medical condition where my bladder was a lot smaller than children my age, so I had issues with bedwetting. One night my dad told me to go get my nighttime pull-up on and get ready for bed. My room was dark and I walked in and I felt this terrible feeling of something wrong. I walked across my room to my dresser to get my pull-up and I heard a faint little whisper. I have no idea how to describe this whisper other than to say it sounded like a starfish in the Aquamarine movie with Sarah Paxton. It was whispering mean, hurtful comments to me. The comments were so mean that I ran out of my room crying, told my dad, and he, of course, didn't believe me and told me it was just my imagination. So I went back to my room and looked in my closet. There in the bottom of my closet were a pair of eyes. They were green and yellow. I called to my dad to my room to show him, and as he came in, he said he didn't see anything. "They're right there, Daddy." Then the eyes started mocking me in a whispering tone. "They're right here, Daddy. Stop mocking me. Stop mocking me. Daddy, they won't stop. Daddy, they won't stop." Once again, he told me that it was my imagination. I slept with my mom and dad that night. They were back again the next night. Told my dad and he said it was impossible because he flushed the eyes down the toilet after I went to bed. They were still there though and very much real. I ended up ignoring them because I noticed they enjoyed getting a rise out of me, and eventually I stopped seeing them. Other strange things would happen in that house, but that by far is the one that stuck out to me the most. The scariest moment of my life. So back in 2013, 2014, I basically lived by myself. I was 14 at the time. Both parents were alcoholics. Dad was on the other side of town with a one-bedroom apartment, and my mom was always with her boyfriend. That being said, most of the time I'd have a friend come sleep over with me since I don't do well being alone at night. It just always made me feel uneasy. This particular house that we moved into, we'd been living there about 4 months. My brother and mom went together on the lease, but he ended up missing his fiancée, ultimately decided to just help mom pay half the rent and come and go as he needed to. He was a night shift nurse, and his schedule was all over the place. Anyway, on to the interesting part. My friend, let's just call her Mandy for the sake of the story, lived in my neighborhood, which made it easier for her to come and stay. We'd take turns at each other's houses. One night, Mandy and I were doing some hood rat shit. Literally not even a hood rat, the worst, and I didn't really stay out and I smoked cigarettes. But anyway, we were at her neighborhood park hanging out with my boyfriend at the time, Alan, and some dude she wanted to hook up with, which she did in the park bathroom on the floor while I awkwardly sat on the bleachers 3 feet away from Alan because we had only been dating for 2 months. After she did her deed, we walked back to my house. Probably about a 30 to 45 minute walk, so we didn't get there until about 3 a.m. My brother was working that night, so we decided we'd take over his bed instead of my shitty-ass futon that would flip if more than one person was on it. Mandy and I were laying there and I heard her whisper something. I looked over at her and she said, "What?" Her eyes were wide. She said, "I didn't say anything, you just whispered in my ear and freaked me out." I started laughing because for some reason, that's my reaction to situations that scare me. "Mandy, I swear to God I didn't whisper in your ear. You're just trying to freak me out, dude. It's not funny." She jumped up and grabbed her charger and her phone and started saying that she was really scared by that and if we could switch rooms. So we get our shit and go to my mom's room across the hall. She plugs her phone in and starts calling her mutual friend MJ. She starts telling MJ how freaked out she was by what happened. And this next part is what made basically just made me shit my pants. As she's explaining the story to MJ, we hear footsteps that sounded like heavy work boots. And we had hardwood floors in that house, so you could definitely hear it more pronounced. The footsteps started at the far end of the hallway and made their way to my mom's door. Mandy and I were so scared we couldn't even talk. We just looked at each other and then looked at my mom's door, waiting for someone to start banging on it or open it. I tried to rationalize and tell myself it was my brother because he always wore those Danskos, even if he wasn't working. And for anybody who doesn't know what Danskos are, they're basically clogs. I peeked out of the blind since my mom's window was right in front of the driveway and his car wasn't out there. We hear 2 more steps. Kinda sounded like it went to my brother's room. I told Mandy we probably needed to call 911 since someone was in my house. Then it clicked. I had triple-checked the back door and the front door to make sure they were locked. All the windows and the screen door. The screen door was metal and it had a loose panel on the bottom, so it was pretty loud when anyone opened it. It clicked and I didn't hear the screen door, the squeaky front door or the back door, and after about 10 or 15 minutes we get the courage to go up and look. Nothing out of the ordinary, and every door and window was definitely locked. I can't describe the fear I felt that night, not knowing if someone's just about to burst your door open and murder you, or your friend. Shit was terrifying. Ever since that night, Mandy refused to come back. I can't say I don't blame her. That's the end of the stories tonight. As usual, see ya.